Hello everyone, and welcome back to Rebar 360. Today's topic is one of the most overlooked professional skills in rebar detailing, strategic RFI management. Many junior detailers believe that whenever they encounter a doubt, they should immediately raise an RFI. Although that may seem like the safest approach, it's often the wrong one. Every unnecessary RFI increases the workload for contractors, consultants, and structural engineers. More importantly, it slows down project progress and can affect your team's professional reputation. In this session, we'll discuss when an RFI is truly required, when it isn't, and how experienced rebar detailers make the right decision before contacting the design team. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to reduce unnecessary RFIs while improving the quality of the ones you do raise. One of the most common mistakes among beginner rebar detailers is raising an RFI for every small uncertainty. Imagine you're detailing a beam and can't immediately locate the lap splice information. Instead of checking the general notes, structural specifications, or previous RFIs, you send a new RFI to the consultant. Multiply this behavior across an entire detailing team, and suddenly the consultant receives dozens of unnecessary questions every week. An RFI is not a shortcut for avoiding investigation. It's not a way to transfer responsibility to the engineer. A professional detailer first reviews all available documents, understands the design intent, and only raises an RFI when the information is genuinely missing or conflicting. That's the difference between a junior detailer and an experienced one. A high-quality RFI has three essential characteristics. First, it identifies a genuine conflict or missing information. There must be a real issue that cannot be resolved from the available documents. Second, it provides complete references. Instead of writing, beam size is confused, mention the exact drawing numbers, sheet references, detail callouts, and revisions involved. Third, ask one clear and actionable question. Whenever possible, suggest a possible solution. For example, sheet S302 shows beam B5 with a depth of 600 mm, detail 4 on sheet S501 indicates 650 mm. Please confirm the correct depth for detailing. Notice how the engineer can answer this question immediately because you've already done the investigation. This is an excellent example of a valid RFI. The structural plan indicates a transfer beam depth of 600 mm. However, the sectional detail shows the same beam as 650 mm. These are two official contract documents providing conflicting information. The detailer is not expected to decide which one is correct. Instead, the RFI simply identifies both drawing references and requests confirmation. This is exactly what an RFI is intended for, resolving genuine design conflicts, not routine detailing decisions. So far, we've seen what makes a valid RFI. Now let's discuss why so many unnecessary RFIs are raised in real projects. In my experience, most unnecessary RFIs are not caused by poor drawings, they're caused by an incomplete drawing review. The first and most common reason is failing to review all related documents. Many detailers focus only on the sheet they're currently detailing. For example, while detailing a beam, they may ignore the general notes sheet, structural specifications, standard details, or related sections. Later, they raise an RFI asking for information that already is somewhere else in the drawing package. Before raising an RFI, ask yourself, have I checked every relevant structural drawing in note? Quite often, you'll find the answer without involving the design team. The second common cause is ignoring revisions and cross-discipline drawings. Construction drawings are throughout a project. New revisions, addendums, and design updates are issued regularly. Sometimes the structural drawing has already been revised, or the architectural layout provides the missing dimension you're looking for. Experienced detailers always verify the latest revision status before assuming there's a problem. They also compare structural drawings with architectural drawings whenever dimensions, openings, or wall locations are involved. The third cause is transferring detailing decisions to the structural engineer. This is a habit every professional detailer should avoid. For example, questions about standard lap splice locations, concrete cover requirements, bar sequencing, or reinforcement arrangement are often governed by project specifications, design standards, or accepted detailing practices. These are part of a detailer's professional responsibility. An RFI should never be used simply because we don't want to make a technical decision that's already cut to contract documents or industry standards. Remember, every unnecessary RFI consumes valuable time, not only for the detailer but also for the contractor, consultant, and structural engineer. A professional rebar detailer doesn't ask more questions, they ask better questions after completing a thorough technical review. Many detailers think that raising an RFI is as simple as sending an email and waiting for a reply. In reality, every RFI follows a formal workflow that involves multiple stakeholders, and each step consumes valuable project time. Let's walk through this process. The first step is generation. A detailer identifies an issue and prepares an RFI. At this stage, work related to that specific structural member often comes to a halt because the detailer cannot proceed until clarification is received. Next comes log and route. The RFI is not sent directly to the structural engineer in most cases. It is first reviewed by the contractor or project management team. They verify whether the question is valid and then formally forward it to the consultant. Every RFI is assigned a tracking number and recorded in the document control system. The third step is engineering review. The consultant studies and determines whether it requires input from the structural engineer. Depending on the complexity, they may need to review calculations, compare multiple drawings, or coordinate with other disciplines such as architecture or MEP. Even a seemingly simple question can require significant engineering effort. The fourth step is sign-off. If the clarification affects construction methods, project cost, material quantities, or the project schedule, the client or owner's representative may also need to review and approve the proposed solution before it becomes an official instruction. Finally, we have the return loop. The approved response back through the same communication chain, from the consultant to the contractor and then to the detailing team. Only after receiving this official response can the detailer continue the work. Now think about the time involved. This entire process can take several days, and on larger or more complex projects, it may even take months. That's why experienced detailers don't raise RFIs casually. Every unnecessary RFI creates delays, increases administrative work, and affects the overall project schedule. Before preparing an RFI, ask yourself one important question: can I resolve this issue by reviewing the available specifications, revisions, or previous RFIs? If the answer is yes, you've saved time not only for yourself but for the entire project team. So far, we've discussed the time and administrative effort involved in processing an RFI. But there's another consequence that's often overlooked: your professional credibility. When a detailing team raises too many low-value RFIs, the project team starts to notice a pattern. Let's look at the two biggest risks. The first is loss of partner credibility. Structural engineers, consultants, and contractors work with many detailing companies throughout their careers. They quickly recognize the difference between teams that investigate issues thoroughly and those that ask questions without first checking the available information. Imagine receiving 10 RFIs in a week, but 7 of them could have been answered simply by reading the general notes or reviewing another drawing sheet. Over time, the engineering team may begin to think, this detailing team isn't doing enough homework before asking questions. Once that perception develops, it becomes difficult to regain confidence. Even when you submit a genuinely critical RFI, it may not receive the urgency it deserves because previous unnecessary RFIs have reduced your team's credibility. Now let's discuss the second risk, the document control burden. Every RFI is an official project document. It must be assigned a unique number, entered document management system, distributed to the appropriate stakeholders, tracked for responses, archived after closure, and maintained as part of the project's permanent records. This means that every unnecessary RFI creates extra work, not only for the detailer but also for document controllers, project managers, consultants, contractors, sometimes even the client. On large infrastructure projects, hundreds of RFIs may already be circulating. Adding unnecessary RFIs increases administrative workload, slows response times, and makes it harder to identify the truly critical issues. This is why experienced rebar detailers focus quality over quantity. Their goal is not to raise more RFIs. Their goal is to raise fewer, better, and more meaningful RFIs that genuinely help move the project forward. Remember this simple principle: every RFI you submit represents your professionalism. A well-prepared RFI builds confidence. A poorly researched RFI damages trust. Let's take a moment to look at RFIs from the structural engineer's point of view. As rebar detailers, we often think that once we send an RFI, the engineer simply reads it, types a quick response, and sends it back. But that's rarely how it works. Behind every RFI, there is a technical review process. When an engineer receives your question, the first step is to understand exactly what you're asking. If your RFI clearly identifies the issue, references the correct drawing sheets, and explains the conflict, the review can begin immediately. However, if the RFI is vague, for example, beam reinforcement is clear. Please clarify. The engineer first has to determine which beam, which drawing, which location, and what exactly is unclear. Valuable time is wasted before the technical review even begins. Once the issue is understood, the engineer may need to compare multiple structural drawings, review design calculations, and verify the design intent. If the issue affects architectural layouts, MEP services, or construction sequencing, they may also need to coordinate with other disciplines before providing an answer. Sometimes, what appears to be a simple detailing question can trigger discussions between structural, architectural, and MEP teams to ensure that any clarification doesn't create new conflicts elsewhere in the project. Now let's talk about the vicious cycle of poor RFIs. Suppose your RFI doesn't include drawing references, dimensions, or enough context. Instead of answering your question, the engineer has to respond with another request asking for additional information or clarification. At that point, the RFI comes back to the detailing team. The detailer gathers more information, updates the RFI, and sends it again. The consultant reviews it once more, forwards it to the engineer, and the entire review cycle starts all over again. This unnecessary back and forth wastes time for everyone involved and delays project progress. That's why a high-quality RFI should answer the engineer's first questions before they even have to ask them. Whenever you prepare an RFI, include the exact drawing numbers, sheet references and details, grid locations or member marks, a brief explanation of the conflict, and, if appropriate, a proposed solution or interpretation. By doing this, you make it much easier for the engineer to review your request and provide a fast, accurate response. Remember, your goal isn't to ask a question. Your goal is to help the engineer answer it efficiently. Before you raise an RFI, there's one question every professional rebar detailer should ask: have I exhausted all the available project information? Experienced detailers don't immediately send questions to the structural engineer. Instead, they conduct a systematic investigation using the project documents already available. Let's go through the key sources you should always review. First, structural plan sheets and general notes. This should always be your starting point. Many questions related to concrete cover, reinforcement spacing, lap splices, development lengths, bar marks, and construction requirements are already addressed in the notes. Surprisingly, many unnecessary RFIs arise simply because this sheet wasn't reviewed carefully. Second, architectural drawings. Structural drawings don't always contain every dimension or opening location. If you're detailing reinforcement around walls, doors, shafts, architectural openings, the architectural drawings often provide the missing information. Third, global engineering specifications. Project specifications define material grades, lap splice requirements, concrete strength, reinforcement standards, tolerances, and construction procedures. If you're unsure about a standard requirement, always consult the specifications before asking the engineer. Fourth, detail callouts and sections. Plans provide the overall layout, but details and sections explain how the reinforcement should actually be arranged. Many detailing questions can be resolved simply by reviewing the detail. Fifth, project addendums and revisions. Construction projects constantly evolve. Before assuming there's a discrepancy, confirm that you're working with the latest revision. Many apparent conflicts disappear once you open the most recent drawing set. Sixth, previous RFI history. Many organizations maintain an RFI log. Before creating a new RFI, check whether the same question has already been answered earlier in the project. Reusing an approved clarification saves time for everyone. Seventh, internal senior detailer review. One of the most valuable resources in any detailing office is experience. Before escalating a question externally, discuss it with a senior detailer or team lead. Their practical knowledge can often resolve issues in just a few minutes. And finally, don't forget to apply your own engineering judgment. As detailers, we're expected to interpret drawings, understand detailing standards, and solve routine problems independently. Think of these 9 sources as your internal investigation checklist. If you've reviewed them carefully and the information is still missing, conflicting, or technically impossible to interpret, then you have a strong justification for raising an RFI. But if the answer is already available within the project documents, you've just saved valuable time for yourself, your company, and the entire project team. Better questions, not more questions. One characteristic separates an average rebar detailer from an exceptional one. It isn't how many RFIs they raise. It's how they ask questions. Senior detailers understand that an RFI is the final step in the investigation process, not the first. When they encounter a problem, they don't immediately open an RFI form. Instead, they begin by studying the drawings in detail. They compare plan views with sections, review detail callouts, examine general notes, verify specifications, and check the latest revisions. Their objective is to understand the engineer's design intent before assuming that information is missing. Only after completing this investigation do they decide whether an RFI is actually necessary. And when they do prepare an RFI, they provide everything the engineer needs to answer it quickly. For example, instead of writing, "Please clarify beam reinforcement," a senior detailer might write, "Structural Plan S304, Grid C5, Beam B12 shows 425 mm bottom bars continuous." However, Section 6 on Drawing S508 indicates 325 mm bottom bars at the same location. We have verified that both sheets are revision 3. Please confirm the correct reinforcement for fabrication. Notice the difference. The second RFI identifies the exact drawing numbers, the grid location, the member mark, the specific conflict, confirm that the latest revisions were reviewed. This tells the engineer that the detailer has already done the necessary homework. Experienced detailers also try to make the engineer's job easier. If appropriate, they may even suggest a possible interpretation or solution. For example, if the intent is to match Section 6, we will proceed with 325 mm bottom bars unless otherwise instructed. This doesn't mean the detailer is making design decisions. It simply provides context and helps the engineer respond more efficiently. Remember, structural engineers appreciate RFIs that are concise, complete, and technically prepared. The easier you make it for them to understand the issue, the faster you'll receive a response. So don't measure your professionalism by the number of RFIs you submit. Measure it by the quality of your investigation and the clarity of your communication. That's how senior detailers earn the trust of engineers, contractors, and clients. Now we've reached one of the most practical slides in this presentation, the RFI decision matrix. Think of this as a quick checklist that helps you decide whether an issue truly requires an RFI or whether it can be resolved through proper document review. Let's look at each scenario. Scenario 1, conflicting beams. Suppose the structural plan shows a beam depth of 600 mm, while the section drawing shows 650 mm for the same beam. This is a genuine conflict between two contract documents. In this situation, you should first verify that both drawings are the latest revisions. If the conflict exists, this absolutely requires an RFI because only the design engineer can determine the correct design intent. This is a high-priority RFI. Scenario 2, missing rebar clearance information. Now imagine you're detailing reinforcement and you're unsure about the required concrete cover or rebarance. Should you immediately raise an RFI? Probably not. The first place to check is the general notes, project specifications, or standard structural details. These requirements are almost always defined there. If the information is available, there is no reason to raise an RFI. Remember, not finding information immediately doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Scenario 3, unclear wall dimensions. Let's consider another example. A structural drawing doesn't clearly show the distance between a wall edge and a beam. Before raising an RFI, compare the structural drawing and architectural drawings. Architectural layouts often contain dimensions that are intentionally omitted from structural plans. Many detailing issues disappear simply by coordinating with another discipline. So in this case, check the architectural drawings first. Scenario 4, lap splice lengths. Here's another common situation. You're unsure about the required lap splice length for reinforcing bars. Many junior detailers immediately ask the structural engineer. However, lap splice requirements are normally defined in the project specifications, design notes, or applicable design codes. Unless the project contains conflicting information or the lap length is completely undefined, this does not require an RFI. Instead, review the specifications carefully. The bigger lesson. Notice a pattern. Out of these 4 scenarios, only one actually requires an RFI. The other 3 can usually be resolved through proper investigation. This perfectly illustrates the mindset of a professional rebar detailer. Professional detailers don't simply ask, "What should I do?" They first ask, "Where can I verify this information?" That simple change in thinking dramatically reduces unnecessary RFIs, speeds up detailing, and builds confidence with engineers and contractors. Always remember, an RFI should be your final option, not your first reaction. As we come to the end of this presentation, I'd like to leave you with one important message that every professional rebar detailer should remember. An RFI should solve a problem, not create one. The quality of your RFIs reflects the quality of your detailing. When you raise an RFI without reviewing the drawings, specifications, revisions, or previous clarifications, you're not just creating extra work. You're also increasing project delays and reducing confidence in your detailing team. On the other hand, when you submit a well-researched RFI with clear drawing references, a concise explanation of the issue, and supporting information, you're demonstrating professionalism. You're showing the design team that you've done your homework and that the question truly requires their expertise. Always remember that an RFI is not a substitute for technical knowledge. As rebar detailers, our responsibility is to interpret drawings, coordinate information from different disciplines, apply detailing standards, and resolve routine detailing issues independently. The structural engineer should only be involved when the design intent is genuinely unclear, conflicting, or missing. Before you raise your next RFI, pause for a moment and ask yourself these 5 questions. Have I reviewed all the relevant structural drawings? Have I checked general notes and project specifications? Have I verified the latest revisions and addendums? Have I looked at the architectural drawings or previous RFIs? Can I justify why this question requires the engineer's decision? If you can confidently answer yes to all of these questions, then your RFI is likely accurate. If not, continue your investigation. One of the biggest differences between a junior detailer and a senior detailer isn't experience alone, it's discipline. Senior detailers know that solving problems independently is part of their professional responsibility. They don't raise more RFIs, raise better RFIs. As your career progresses, you'll discover that clients and engineers value detailers who think critically, investigate thoroughly, and communicate clearly. That is what transforms a good detailer into a trusted engineering professional. Thank you for staying with me throughout this presentation. I hope this session has changed the way you think about RFIs in rebar detailing. Remember, raising an RFI is not just about asking a question. It's about demonstrating professionalism, technical understanding, and respect for the time of everyone involved in the project. Before sending an RFI, always investigate thoroughly, review all available project documents, coordinate with your team, and make sure the issue genuinely requires engineering clarification. By following this approach, you'll reduce unnecessary delays, improve communication with structural engineers, and build a strong professional reputation as a reliable rebar detailer. If you found this video helpful, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing to Rebar 360, and sharing it with your colleagues and fellow engineers. Don't forget to leave your questions, experiences, or challenges related to RFIs in the comments section. Happy to discuss them in future videos. At Rebar 360, our mission is to help engineers and detailers develop practical skills that are used every day in real construction projects. Thank you once again for watching.